2019, in an Amazon warehouse in San Bernardino, California, Beverly Rosales filed a workplace discrimination charge. She was being let go from Amazon for getting pregnant. Beverly had worked in the shipping warehouse for 2 years, and she knew the increased bathroom breaks during her first trimester would put her on the chopping block. Her fears were justified too, because Beverly got the boot right after Cyber Monday, Amazon's busiest shopping day. She's not alone either. According to CNET.com, 7 women had filed suits for being discriminated against by Amazon for their pregnancy, and every one of these cases has been settled out of court. In an Amazon warehouse in Staten Island, New York, Jim Pat Lacewell, a former inmate, said he'd rather go back to prison than work at Amazon again. The 25-minute wait to get through security, the grueling work, and the way managers treated the robots better than humans made him go on record with The Guardian, saying, quote, "I would rather go back to a state correctional facility and work for 18 cents an hour than do that job," Lacewell said. "I'm sure Mr. Bezos couldn't do a full shift at that place." That same Staten Island warehouse landed the news earlier for its labor protest, when workers went to battle for their short 15-minute breaks. Not that the workers wanted more breaks. They weren't being greedy. They just wanted their 2 15-minute breaks to be stacked together into one 30-minute break. 15 minutes wasn't long enough to walk across the sprawling warehouse floor and back. To get any rest during the 10-hour shift, workers would have to sit on the ground or sit at the warehouse belts for 15 minutes. In 2019, the Staten Island facility also shattered records for workplace injuries. And this is based on Amazon's own injury report. The rate of injuries and severity were staggering, according to the nonprofit law organization Make the Road. To their own admission, Amazon's warehouse beat out steel foundries and sawmills for injuries, both in frequency and in severity. For the record, the fulfillment center, which is what Amazon calls its warehouses, had an injury rate that was 50% higher than a steel foundry and triple the injury rate of a sawmill. In 2018, it was also revealed that thousands of Amazon workers received food stamps to augment their $15 an hour pay rates, which was briefly met with demands from Twitter to force Amazon into paying for those food stamps, which would shift the burden of feeding Amazon's workers from the public back onto Amazon. Bernie Sanders later used this as a rallying cry for laborer rights. If we wanted, we could play this game all day. The internet is bursting at the seams with horror stories from Amazon warehouses. And if you missed the news, Jeff Bezos, 2020's richest man in the world, has just vacated the position as Amazon CEO. While Bezos might be stepping down, his legacy remains. And it's a legacy we want to explore on the podcast today. A legacy that affects every man and woman in America, even if you don't work for Amazon. A legacy called wage theft, which can happen to every company at every level. And in all likelihood, it's already taken money out of your pocket at least once. You're listening to Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet and get to the facts.
Here's a fun fact. If you're a full-time minimum wage worker in America, there are exactly 0 counties where you can rent a 2-bedroom apartment or house, which is kind of important because we want to compare how much Amazon thinks a full-time warehouse worker can live on with minimum wage in its city of operation. For example, The minimum wage in Staten Island, where our rather go back to prison full-timer was working, is $14 an hour, which means Amazon was beating minimum wage by a whole dollar. Or take what Beverly Rosales was making in San Bernardino back in 2019, $15 an hour, which is exactly what her county's minimum wage just got bumped up to this January. And I can hear what some of you listeners are shouting at their phones as we talk about companies that barely beat minimum wage. Get a grown-up job. But today's episode is all about those grown-up jobs. We want to find out where they all went. Because as of right now, 42% of Americans make $15 an hour or less. To clarify, that's 150 million Americans who are making Amazon warehouse money or worse. And we're talking about the biggest companies in America that have been caught red-handed stealing from their $15 an hour employees. Because businesses like Amazon and Walmart have become like payday loan scams of capitalism. Except the shadiness isn't as obvious when it's perpetrated by Jeff Bezos or the Walmart family. So those are our 3 myths today, folks. What wage theft looks like when it's committed by companies that employ half of America. How companies like Amazon abuse the healthcare system to lock employees into shit jobs by holding carrot of health benefits in front of our faces. And we'll look at where all the big boy and big girl jobs went and why half of us were left sorting cardboard boxes for $15 an hour. Like one side of America got stuck packing for moving day, and it just never ends. But first, I want to talk to Joe about our own experiences with wage theft and paid middlemen. Well, Joe, I know this hit a nerve with you. This wage theft thing got you all worked up because you hurried this episode up because it's a hot spot in the news right now.
Yeah, we have at least 2 or 3 articles we're going to cover that are happening right now as we sort of sit here in the studio. But first, I feel like everyone I talk to about this, they have their own experience in wage theft.
Agreed. It's a 100% thing we have all in common.
Yeah, exactly. It was one thing where, like, I hadn't heard it brought up before, but as soon as I read about it, everybody I knew had something to weigh in on.
Well, give me one of yours.
Okay. For folks that follow the show, they probably heard me talk about working state or contract security, where you get contracted out to somebody and you basically sit at a desk. My version of wage theft, and this isn't quote-unquote wage theft until I get to the end of this. I found out one time that the security companies I work for, they make more than 40%. It was like 30 to 40% of my take-home. So that they almost get half of what I effectively make for the company. And I know some of that goes to like overhead and how much it costs to run a business and things like that. But I realize that they're not like harvesting wheat. They're not like putting bricks together or anything. Like at the end of the day, I am their product.
Yeah, they're not running Super Bowl commercials, or they don't have a storefront that costs them this much to make.
Right. Everything just comes down to the paperwork they put in to like make sure that we're insured and things like that.
You can't help but think, couldn't they give me a little bigger cut of that?
Exactly. Like, it doesn't have to be huge. Oh, and by the way, completely and totally germane to the subject, when I work security, it's $15 an hour. Right on the money. Like, it is exactly 15. So do you have... and the wage theft part of that is they used to make us take our lunches at our desks. And that's the part of this where I realized it was wage theft.
Right, not a change of scenery. Don't go to the local restaurant. You're stuck there.
Right, exactly. It's if you don't have the freedom to actually go take a break during your break, that is a form of wage theft.
I got a few. Everyone knows most people worked in a restaurant some part of their career, and a lot of people one of their first jobs is a food server. Well, it's very common for the managers in any restaurant, let's say Applebee's, is when it gets slow, they start kicking people out. They only want you for when they need you. And if you're not getting paid, so they'll make you do things like roll silverware off the clock. Hurry up, Joe, clock out, get out of here. And of course, everyone wants to go home.
Right.
And you do work for tips, but when you get your paycheck, you're trying to, your bills are 40 hours a week. And because you get kicked out of work early every night, you only get about 25 hours.
Okay. And by doing that, they're also keeping you under full time. So those benefits wink out of existence if you don't make 32.
And they get paid bonuses. Every manager in every restaurant will tell you they get paid bonuses on how big the sales are and how low they can keep payroll.
Gotcha.
So if they didn't have to pay you, they would.
Right, exactly. Do you have more than the restaurant? Because I feel like we could. At the beginning of the episode, there was a joke. We could do this all day. I kind of want to do this a little bit more.
And I was in the construction business for a long time, and all that is stealing. So I'm going to leave that one out of it.
Okay.
That's stealing from customers, stealing from each other. The bosses doesn't want to pay for any. They don't want to pay for the supplies to do the building. Right. But I'm going to tell you, I was in the car business for a long time, and what they have in the car business is called PAC, and I'll kind of explain this to you. Let's say that the car dealership bought the car for $10,000.
Okay.
And you as a salesperson sold it for $12,000. Okay. So there's $2,000 of profit, and you get 25% of that. But what they do in the car business is they say we have a thing called PAC. It helps pay for our store. It helps pay for business cards. It helps pay for our advertising. So they'll take $1,000 out of it and put that on top of the $10,000. So when you sell a car for $12,000, you only made $1,000 in profit. But through the years, they've gotten greedier and greedier with PAC. It started out as $300. Now in stores, it's as much as $3,000. And that doesn't go in line with their advertising or all their expenses. It's just a way so they don't have to pay salespeople commission.
Wow. So I know that car salesmen get a bad reputation, but the employers of car salesmen maybe even a little bit worse sometimes.
Absolutely. And now they've gotten even more clever about how to do it. So they'll take the car and they'll put it in the shop. And even though they own the dealership, it only costs, $10 to do an oil change for them. They'll bill the car $400. So they just keep going and get greedier and greedier. So the salesperson sells it for a lot of money, but the only people that make money on it and the salespeople only get like $100, which is nothing for selling a car. And the dealership and all its managers will make the lion's share.
Damn. I did not think there was a way for you to make me feel sorry for car salesmen.
Like attorneys and car salesmen, nobody cares, right?
Right, exactly.
And then I got one more, and then again, I could go on all day. This is a different industry. I worked as a temp for when I was between things, having some tough times in my life, and I used to work at the dollar store in their warehouse. And they used to do this thing where they would take an hour, and everybody would race to see who would get the most work done. And then when they've had the top three from the warehouse, and you go and you do this, they take a short little break, about 3 minutes, and they'd stand kind of on a podium like the Olympics.
Okay.
And everybody would cheer. So what they did was just get us to work our asses off for an extra hour.
So for the last hour, you were putting in 3 hours of work, and the monetary benefit to all that work for everyone's work was 3 people get cheered at.
Recognition only.
Oh, that is devious.
And I was falling for it. Everything. And Amazon has something similar they call a swag thing, where they'll give you a prize if whoever works the fastest for a certain amount of time.
Right. And I bet the prize is just whatever garbage they weren't able to sell that day.
Yeah, they got lots of shit. Just take something off the line, right?
Right, exactly. So I've slowly convinced myself of something while researching this article.
What's that?
I absolutely think that Amazon must have an algorithm somewhere that has told them that $15 an hour and benefits is exactly what it takes to keep somebody on the hook.
So if it's $14.95, they'd lose about a third of their workforce. They just know exactly what the hairline is.
Yeah, I mean, they use algorithms for everything. There's no way they land on that number by accident. And we'll get into this. This is a little bit of a tease for later. But so many jobs, even respectable, well-paying jobs, when you salary them and keep somebody working throughout the day, it ends up coming out to be about $15 an hour, even if you think you're making $22, $25, whatever. So we'll sort of, as this episode progresses, we'll get into that magic number of 15 or less. But I thought it might be fun to jump into one of our breaking news articles. Did you hear about this stuff about Biden trying to get a $15 minimum wage passed?
Federal minimum wage raised. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was researching this article, and it popped up in breaking news, and it was he's trying to get it passed with the Corona bill, like the stimulus package. So I don't know if that's because that's supposed to keep up with inflation, or if he knows of that his team or whoever is doing his analytics, they know of Amazon's algorithm. Or just it's become so prevalent across the workforce and across companies that maybe everyone's just agreed on that number. I'm not sure.
I think it's a math one. I'll tell you why. Because on this last stimulus package where they were giving everyone $600 extra federal for unemployment, well, that's a lot. So they knew that what regular unemployment was not realistic.
Right.
That it would just the whole economy would collapse. So they said, okay, we'll give them. That's why it seemed like a lot to me.
Yeah, they must have. I mean, like everyone's got stats and things like that. We're going to get into this, by the way, but the one thing we're not going to cover a whole lot on is everything like every metric you can possibly look up says that wages have not kept up with inflation. And that's basically one of the first arguments against minimum wage being raised that gets brought up is minimum wage being raised causes inflation. And over the past 10 years, since 2008, 2009, and we will get into exactly why those years are very important to our model here, it seems like the opposite has been proven, that we've had inflation in the last 10 years, but minimum wage did not match it. Wages in general did not match it. It did not march up with it. So we've basically over time we've kind of proven the opposite of that argument. And I'll share a little bit of my speaking background with you. Were you aware that I was in a debate club?
No, but you like to argue. You think you know everything. I'm not surprised.
I don't think anyone's surprised by that. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was in a political debate club. And somebody literally said that about the argument for minimum wage, not raising it, is it was somebody who works in a tech company. I won't shout out their name, but they chose to debate this. This was the hill they were going to die on. And this was he was a middle manager of a tech company. So he made good money. And he yelled at us in the audience. He's like, if you are making minimum wage, go get a big boy job.
That's where you got that line. That's original stuff.
It is original stuff. And I remember thinking, you, sir, don't know how many people are working what you think are childish jobs. And so on this episode, I actually went looking for, $15 an hour is not, it's soon to maybe be minimum wage, but that is the number he was talking about. It was how much we pay warehouse workers, how much we pay people at Walmart, how much I was getting in contract security. $15 an hour is across the board the agreed upon amount for a living job, a living wage.
What can I say, too? What a jerk.
Yeah, it was a real dick thing to say.
And
like, what an argument.
I hope you roasted him.
Yes. I wasn't debating that
Justice.
day, but later I did go up and argue that down, so it was fun. So we're going to first define wage theft, and then we're going to get into some of the court cases that have proven that it is happening. Because we don't want to just say, here's wage theft, think about it, everyone, and deal with it. We actually want to point out the court cases where it was proven that justice was had, or justice is ongoing, because we want to demonstrate that it's happening. So at the top, we talked about how wage theft is being asked to work when you're off the clock, being asked to take your breaks in places where you aren't being paid, or where you're not actually leaving work, where you're still at your desk working. or it's not being compensated for time. I think that's the best way to put it. You are not being compensated for a chunk of your time.
And a point I really want to stress on this, and I will through the whole podcast, is that as you go up the levels and go higher up in the company, you don't have this. They're really picking on the lowest end of it, which is very sad.
Right. They are not asking the managers and the they're not asking the people who are up on the ladder. They are pushing wage theft onto the people who are building the pyramid, not the people holding the whips. Our first metric is going to come from, it was a 2017 study by the Economic Policy Institute. And they took the 10 most populous states because that would give them sort of a good sample size. And they went around and they estimated that about 2.4 million people lose a combined $8 billion in income every year.
$8 billion.
Yes.
Stolen.
Right. Now, that's just for the 10 most populous states. If that carries across state by state, like I know that some companies, the thing that might skew their data, companies like Amazon and Walmart and these huge big box companies might be setting up in states that are extra populated. So they may not have, like, say, a fulfillment center in Montana. I didn't check into that. Or Wyoming. I think Wyoming is the least populated state by land mass. But they are estimating, and this is something that the FBI thinks. If the FBI thinks this is true, then they're on to something. They think that it's half as much as all property theft combined. The FBI estimates it was $16.4 billion was lost in wage theft from large companies.
The property theft being
everything that ever gets stolen.
Shoplifting cars.
Taken assets, home invasions.
Okay.
I mean, like, literally everything people think of as classic crime, like even cat burglars. If you combine all theft everywhere in the U.S., the FBI thinks that combine all that, half of that is how much gets stolen in wage theft by companies each year.
But CEOs, managers, supervisors don't go to jail or do community service for
right, exactly.
They get promoted.
Yeah, they're not being slapped on the wrist like a car thief, or they're not being put into jail like a cat burglar or somebody who steals objects. They're being promoted. Now, only in these 10 states, the typical worker victimized by minimum wage violations is underpaid by approximately $64 a week, which totals to about $3,300 a year. So, like you said, this doesn't mean anything to a manager. This doesn't mean anything to a CEO. $3,300 per year is nothing if you make as much as, if you're above the happiness index, the 80 or 90K a year that it takes to be happy if you're working a high-end job. But $3,300 a year if you are making less than $30K, that's a big chunk.
It's a car payment. It's food.
Yeah,
it's clothes for your kids.
It's the difference between being kicked out of your house during Corona. I mean, it's not to put too fine a point on it, but that difference is literally getting people kicked out of their houses right now. The EPI also estimates that the total yearly amount for American wage theft is closer to $15 billion. So these are not small numbers at all. And it's, as we get into it, you'll find out that not only is it not small numbers, oftentimes it's legally gray, meaning companies are getting away with it. Would you like to jump into one of these court cases?
Oh, please. I like specific examples.
I would like to start with one that will make us feel a little bit better, one that they actually got caught and were punished for. This happened in Braun versus Walmart. Now, I will start by saying that I didn't find this case by, I wasn't going through legal cases that would prove the point. I was actually just watching YouTube videos of people talking about wage theft. And I got curious because I'd say 8 out of 10 videos that popped up They were about Walmart. They were just people complaining. Like
Well, as a customer of Walmart, sometimes the people there are the picture of misery. I mean, there's no other way to describe them. They're just absolutely unhappy.
if you go to adopt a pet at the pound and they look sad and they're behind the cage, that's the human version of that. They want to be adopted out of Walmart.
But they're not as cute and cuddly, and you don't want to take them home with you. You don't think about them when you go to bed. I should have went back to Walmart and taken home Teresa.
I don't adopt greeters very often, but I think I might want to after this. It got me looking into Walmart. Why are they so? Why are they the poster boy at this moment of wage theft? Amazon is too. Amazon is in our crosshairs as well. But this first case, it came up when there was a class action lawsuit, and this was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They sided with the jury sided with the workers of Walmart for a $188 million settlement. And what they said is it was because of missed rest breaks and working after the shifts had ended.
Wow, that's a big chunk of money. I don't know how many people it went to, probably quite a few, and half of that went to the attorneys, but even so.
Yeah.
Something was done on a very high level or a lot amount, right?
Right. Yeah, it was big enough to where they were caught, and it was large enough to where they ended up having to pay for it. Well, the 6-week trial took place in 2006, but the articles came out a little bit later. I'm going to read from the trial here, just to sort of like give you an idea of what happened. Quote, Braun plaintiffs presented evidence of Walmart's written policy to provide rest breaks and to pay employees for all hours worked and to prohibit unpaid work. The plaintiffs presented Walmart's own internal audits that showed widespread rest break violations, as well as expert analysis of Walmart's time clock records, cash register login data, and corporate policies. Now, the reason I wanted to read that, it has a couple of really key words in here, that Walmart's own policies said that they needed to be paid for their hourly work. That should go under the no-duh category.
Yeah, we pay you and we clock in.
Right. We literally are paying you for your time.
It's suspicious. Right?
Yeah. So they had to basically hold their own no-duh policy against them, because Walmart's defense wasn't, we weren't paying you for things that you were supposed to be doing. Walmart's defense was, you can't sue us based on a sample size. So this goes back to a court case. It's called trial by formula.
You have to do it to everybody. It can't just be one store in Pittsburgh.
Exactly. So the way a trial by formula works is basically you're not allowed to sue a corporation for damages by taking a group or a quote-unquote slice of how shitty they've been to a few people and then do the math for everybody across the board. Because that would be like, say, all car dealerships of the one you were working at were cheating people, but only 3 people stepped forward to sue the company. That means you would only award those 3 people, because we're not going to do a formula to figure out how much everybody else was cheated. They all have to come forward. However, Walmart's defense, not only was it kind of heinous by being like, we cheated everybody, sure, but only you 3 stepped forward. Their defense was kind of shot down because their own policy stated that they were not supposed to cheat people, and then their own records also showed, yes, we're cheating people.
And let's face it, a lot of people don't want to come forward because they're insecure and they need the job and they don't want to take the risk.
Right, exactly. We're only covering wage theft in this first section here. We are going to get into unfair pay and that $15 black hole that is becoming the job market, like that pay scale that algorithms have figured out. But basically what we want to point out here is that the company isn't... Walmart, when they went to bat, they weren't fighting for a product they were losing. When I think of almost Ayn Rand's objectivism, the idea of a product, the ideal of capitalism is that we have a product, we sell it, we pay our people, and we are so good at our product that we make our money. This is not the ideal of capitalism. This is, we want to put out a bunch of shitty products and we want to get as much money from our employee as possible. We want to dip into their money and make them work off the clock. And this isn't an isolated incident, is what we're saying. The whole point of this first third of our podcast is saying it is so pervasive. It's, it makes up half as much as all property crime total. So the employee body is the product, is basically what we're saying. And I kind of want to get into the benefits. We're not talking about the benefits of working for Walmart. We mean, like, why do people allow this to happen? Why were those Walmart workers not immediately walking out when somebody said, could you please clock out and then come back for an hour and work for us?
Well, I'll lead with a quote. It's from Surviving Amazon. This is a really good article. It's going to be in our show notes. You really have to read it. I mean, it's dense and it's good.
Okay.
And this is the quote. The running joke is that the only benefit to working at Amazon is the benefits.
Okay.
So for full-time employees, Amazon offers health insurance, 401, and then there's a minimum wage. Now, let's go back to our example of the pregnant woman that sued Beverly.
Okay.
First of all, she needs those benefits if you're having a baby.
Yeah. Have you ever looked up how much it costs to have a baby without benefits?
I don't have a clue.
There are ways to do it cheap. Like, it's called scheduling a pregnancy or plan. Like, there are ways to do it for not all of your money forever. But generally speaking, if you have a baby without benefits, you're broke for the rest of your days.
Wow, it just wipes you out.
It totally.
Well, so she needs this benefit. She also needs the job. When you're making $15 an hour, you're living with roommates. You are thinking about, you're living day to day. You're thinking about what food you're going to get and how you're going to pay for it every day, as we said earlier, on food stamps. Now, I want to talk about the ladies who are pregnant. I have lived with pregnant women multiple times in my life, and I know for a fact they have to go to the bathroom all the time. Their bladder is full. They're also fatigued. It's exhausting to grow a person inside of you, right?
That's no small task.
So when these ladies were pregnant, all they were asking for was less time on their feet. Can you imagine being pregnant working on a concrete floor for 8-10 hours?
Not at all.
So they're fatigued, so they want more bathroom breaks than everybody else, and they have evidence that they're pregnant, right? They're not making this up. They're bringing notes in from doctors that saying that they can't work the same hours they did before. They're pregnant. And another thing was, they didn't feel like they had to let them off the hook for lifting heavy things either.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, so it's like, what the fuck?
Not only would make one of these managers do a shift at Amazon, but make them wear just a 10-pound millstone in front of their stomach. Just do that.
Another thing, okay, so there's these people that all sued were on the floor. They were at the kind of the lower level. But managers who went on paternity leave or got pregnant, they came back and they didn't have any complaints. And the reason was they got all the bathroom breaks. They didn't have to do all that. They were the ones, as you referred to, with the whip.
Right. And I want to take this opportunity. I want to do this over and over again during the podcast, by the way. 42%. Half of America works these type of jobs. I just have to keep saying it because this is a big boy, big girl job.
And they're going to be your kids.
Yes.
Or people you know that you
They're
like.
going to have degrees. I worked at a loading dock when I was a young man, and I'd say a third of the people there, they had college degrees. Like, they were educated.
Okay. Now, another thing they have to do when you're working on the floor, you have to learn out ways, hacks, cheats to get your productivity numbers up. And people learn these so they can keep from getting fired. And they pass these tricks around like a coded message, like, okay, you have to do this, and you're gonna get some more productivity.
Right.
Now, another problem is these tricks and these hacks, they don't tell everybody about them. So when Joe and Anthony comes on, and I've been here for 4 months, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to give them to you. You have to figure it out yourself. So we watch new people suffering and bet on how long they're going to last.
Right. And it's tiny things like at the end of like to get to your break quicker, you do things in a certain order. You set a box here. You scan these items last.
You scan
save
real
work
quick,
for a certain
right?
order, right?
In this one window.
Right.
Now, another thing they do is they skirt safety rules to move faster. And that's when we start comparing all the injuries. Severity injuries, too. I laughed when I first read that. Joe wrote that it's more dangerous to work at an Amazon warehouse than
a sawmill or a steel
mill. Right? Who would ever think that? But this is why, because they're exhausted and they're not using all the safety things because they can keep up or they'll get fired.
Right.
Now, they say that someone who works in one of these warehouses for 6 months, people will see them as a celebrity. They look at that person and say, how the hell have you been able to do this for 6 months? There's no way. If I do this for a couple more months, I'm going to be dead out of stress.
I think those people have somehow figured out the value of both pacing themselves and also making it look easy.
Mental illness or necessity, right?
Necessity. That actually probably is way more fair. Just this person, if they don't work that 15-hour a job, they lose a house. So I can see them working 6 months.
Well, they can't feed their 2 kids, right?
Or they're pregnant.
Now, I want to talk about the difference between benefits and pensions.
Okay.
Now, do you know the difference?
I'm young. I've never heard of a pension.
Okay, what a pension is let's say you work for the railroad.
Okay.
And you've been a union railroad person for all these years. When you retire, you get a pension. Police officers get them. Firefighters get them. And you put money into it most of your career. A percentage of your pay goes into it. And so you retire. A lot of these really good pensions, how American companies used to be run, people make about the same as they did as they were working. So that's how they live out their life comfortably. So they have an income. Their income isn't cut down to just Social Security, which is not livable either.
Okay. As an elder millennial, I know that my retirement is actually going to be working as a Walmart greeter and living off of a really crappy 401k.
And being just miserable. He likes the miserable part.
I do, yeah.
That's something he can buy into.
Part of that misery is I'll still be doing the podcast.
I'm stuck with you. Now, the thing that's opposite of the pension is a 401. And the difference is, so with a pension also, I missed this. With a pension, you pay in, but what I missed was the big part. Your company also pays in for every single hour, every single salary that you work there.
Okay.
So it's a team effort. But with a 401, you put in 100%, and shitty companies will match like just a tiny percent.
Yeah, mine does like 2.5% to 5% or something.
Yeah, and they make a big deal out of it, don't they?
Right.
They say,
You
"Oh
should
my
be
God, you're
grateful."
so lucky!" So, at $15 an hour. What Joe's talking about, 401 doesn't add up to much. It's certainly not a pension. It's certainly not going to last.
Right.
Now, another thing I want to talk about too. A lot of times with union jobs and pensions, you have health benefits until you die. Until you get to Medicare or whatever. Let's say you're in the military, you get the VA benefits for the rest of your life.
Right.
You only get benefits at Walmart and Amazon while you're working there.
Yes.
You could break your back, work your ass off, get promoted. When you leave, you're done.
Almost pretty much all companies I was looking into that weren't unionized, the benefits work the same way, where if you leave the company, I mean, like the second you do, Cobra sweeps in and offers to give you the same benefits for $1,500 a month or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, it's like a joke, right?
Yeah.
I was up in Seattle, and we'll end this section on this. Boeing is a huge employer up there. Hundreds of thousands of people work for Boeing. They make airplanes, and they had a pension, and they were in a renegotiation. They were trying to change their pension to a 401. And they were threatening that if they don't do it, they're moving out of Seattle. They're moving out of Renton. They're moving to the East Coast. They're moving to South Carolina. And as a younger man, I didn't quite understand that. I'm thinking, well, let's just take the 401. Who cares, right? We don't want them to leave. We don't want to lose all these great people who work. These people make airplanes. So that's what it was. They want a pension that they earned, that they deserve.
Right.
They're in a very profitable business, Joe. They make airplanes. We're not talking about stacking boxes at Walmart here.
Right.
So
I say I side with the company. How dare those selfish workers want to live after they retire? Why not cater to the rich people who are threatening to move their business?
Now, Amazon picks bad neighborhoods, in neighborhoods that have very, very, very high unemployment, they're in bad areas. Why do you think?
Labor force.
Exactly. Instant labor. That's cheap.
Right. We are, as an apolitical podcast, for two hosts that don't actually have a political tent, we don't side with the parties in America. We are starting to sound shockingly. It sounds like we're taking the labor side versus the company side,
Which would be the blue side, I think. Wouldn't it?
I think so. For the record, I think I speak for Todd. I certainly speak for myself. I do actually side with small business, and I usually side for pro-capitalist matters. But in this particular case, with Amazon wage theft and 50% of America being stuck loading boxes, I'm siding with the people who are getting money taken from them. So I just want to clarify that. When we talk about benefits and we talk about not siding with companies that hold jobs over people's heads and who threaten to not come to your small town that has an incredible unemployment rate and set up a factory, we're going to say that's a shitty way to do things.
Well said. Agreed. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us.
Next week, we're going to be covering part 2 of our wage theft and American wages episode. Stay tuned because we'll be talking about why American companies don't give raises and why crops are being left to rot in some parts of the Farm Belt, while its workers would rather remain unemployed. So we will see you all next week.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.